Hello, we're Group 4 and we're going to be going over Cuba's dual currency system. So we're going to start off with the history of the dual currency system. Then we're going to move on to its consequences, and then the money and banking. And then we'll continue with CUC's issues and CUP's issues. And then we'll finish off with monetary and exchange unifications, and then we'll summarize everything we went over.
The history of the dual currency system dates back to 1989, during when the Cuban economy entered a period known as the Special Period. They entered this period after the fall of the Soviet Union, which was Cuba's major trade and aid partner. During the first 4 years of the recession, the gross domestic product shrank approximately 35% in real terms, and the deficit hovered near 25%. The government chose to assume the deficit and undertook loans through the nation's central bank. The relentless growth of the deficit required printing more and more money, which led to hyperinflation. So the hyperinflation caused Cuba's currency to fall tremendously in value. As a consequence, the dollar began to increase circulation to the point where it became the preferred means of payment for non-state sponsored activities. The state decided to legalize the currency in 1993 as a means to soften the economic devastation. There was a lot of benefits to the exploitation of the dollar's position as the most trusted investment in the world. Such benefits included stability within the otherwise fragile period of adjustment, increase in tourism, facilitation of investment within the business sector, and much more. This led way to the creation of the Cuban convertible peso in 1994, which was made as an effort to bolster the weakening economy. The Cuban convertible peso was also one of the two currencies used in Cuba's dual currency system. At the beginning of 2001, foreign currency constituted more than half of the total quantity of money in circulation in Cuba. Given the diminished significance of the peso at the time, it thus became an important political goal for the state to reclaim monetary sovereignty. So in 2003, Castro's regime began undertaking reforms to eliminate the free circulation of the dollar. They did so by subjugating the use of the dollar to a 10% tax penalty, along with other disincentives and resolutions realized by the central bank. And now Itzel is going to go into more detail about the consequences of the dual currency.
So as for consequences, the current rate of exchange of 1 CUC equals 26.5 CUPs. And most Cuban citizens are paid in CUCs, however, most consumer goods are priced in CUPs. This means that it's the root cause for many Cubans that are unable to afford sufficient food and supplies, and companies are also expected to maintain two books, one in CUC and the other in CUP. A Cuban citizen, Beatriz Gonzalez, said that the dual currency system makes her job complicated, and it requires her to keep one set of books in pesos and another one in hard currency. The dual circulation of money also encourages the concurrent development of two practically segmented economies, and so certain segments of society are inaccessible for Cuban citizens because they run with the CUC, which is a financial or legal limitation to most Cuban citizens. Salary discrepancies between tourist and state economics also cause what we call an inverted pyramid. And with the large earning gaps between state employees and workers within the tourist and foreign investment sectors, it's possible and common that extensively trained professionals garner less than unskilled workers. And so economic talents and energy are diverted towards secondary, non-essential activities at the expense of the more vital primary needs. And now Jacqueline will go over money and banking.
Thank you, Excel. So I'm going to be talking about money and banking. So Cuba has two official currencies in circulation, the Cuban peso and the convertible peso. The convertible peso is pegged 1-to-1 to the US dollar and can be exchanged only within the country. The exchange rate between the CUP and the CUC is usually 25 CUP per 1 CUC. The currency name is the Cuban peso, which stands for CUP, and the convertible peso, which stands for CUC. For the subcurrency, we have the cent and the convertible cent. We also have the division, which is 1 peso equals 100 cents, and 1 convertible peso equals 100 convertible cents. So on this picture, I'm going to be explaining you how to identify the Cuban pesos versus the Cuban convertibles. So the CUC are mostly used by tourists, and the Cuban pesos, also known as moneda nacional, and is mainly used by Cubans. So we have on the left the Cuban pesos, and they usually show pictures of people, and they are lower in paper quality. They almost feel like monopoly money. And on the right hand side, we have the Cuban convertibles. They usually show pictures of statues and monuments. And they also feel more official because they have higher quality paper. So now I'm going to be talking about the Cuban convertibles issues. So Cuba is the only country in the world that prints two currencies. 80% of the citizens earn Cuban pesos. However, many items sold in stores are imported and sold only in convertible pesos. People are not able to afford those goods. So the convertible pesos is creating an economic gap between Cuban citizens. For example, people working in the tourism sector, such as bartenders, taxi drivers, food servers, and hotel workers, can earn the same monthly payment as professionals such as doctors in one day. So the average government worker earns the equivalent to $20 in one day, while a taxi driver can earn $60 in one day. Here we have the picture of a nurse and a taxi driver. Usually the nurse, she mentioned in an interview that she was not able to buy her 5-year-old son toys because toys are usually imported goods and only sold in convertible pesos. So you can see that the difference between taxi drivers and nurses' salaries can really become really different. So now Natalie is going to be talking about the Cuban pesos issues.
Thank you, Jacqueline. So as we already discussed, because the government would loan money from the nation's central bank, there was a lot of hyperinflation that was going on because the bank would be printing a lot of money. This hyperinflation devalued the currency so much so that in 1993, 1 Cuban peso equaled that as to 1 American cent. Another issue with the Cuban peso is that the inferior purchasing power of the Cuban peso simulated economic activity beyond the scope of what is considered legal by the state. So to such an extent that increased corruption into black markets has become the most common means of obtaining certain goods and services otherwise inaccessible to state wage earners. So this dual currency system clearly is a system that hasn't been working the benefit towards the Cuban economy nor towards the Cuban people. And in 2013, the Cuban government saw that and said that it was going to unify the dual currency monetary system, yet the government hasn't taken any steps to progress this goal. We actually have a quote here from one of our sources that states the Cuban government announced that a series of measures would start to be taken to unify the country's currencies and exchange rates, and acknowledged that the end of the dual currency system would not be the end-all solution to the country's economic problems. So despite the fact that the unifying the currencies won't solve all of the problems, it would help resolve the value of the peso itself. So not only is the government looking to unify the system, but there's also a movement going on within the Cuban community where there's an unfounded belief that once the convertible peso is eliminated, most of all the nation's economic problems at the personal and national level will disappear as well. So the people want to move to a system where only the Cuban peso is in circulation for several reasons. One being the Cuban peso holds more sentimental and national value. Another is that the symbolism in restoring the solidarity and credibility in the money of the Cuban people. And lastly, the potentially negative psychological and logistical impact upon Cuban peso wage earners. And now Miguel will go into, Miguel will summarize our presentation up with more on Cuba's dual currency system.
So we found this video, which we believe really well explains what we just talked about really well. And we would just like to show you, it's a quick video.
Imagine a country where the majority of the people are paid with money they can't use to buy most of the things they want. That's Cuba. It's the only country in the world that prints two currencies. So about 80% of the population works for the state, and they're paid with something that's called the peso cubano, also known as the CUP or CUP. And the CUP really can't be used for very much. You can pay your electricity or telephone bill. You can go to a baseball game or buy some vegetables at the local market. But if you go into just about any Cuban store, you'll find that most of the products are imported, and until recently, only available in the other currency, the peso convertible, also known as the CUC or CUC, which is pegged to the dollar, so worth about 25 times more. So why does a country that's essentially broke have all this money? It's complicated. After the 1959 revolution, Che Guevara was put in charge of the Cuban economy, and he had the communist utopian dream of creating a society that didn't need any money. That kind of economic planning didn't work out too well, because in the early 1990s, with the collapse of the Soviet Union, the Cuban economy was dealt a body blow that it's still recovering from even today. That's when Cuban economists came up with the idea that they needed to print their own dollars, the CUC. Here's how it works. When you go into a hotel or bank to change real US dollars into CUCs, the Cuban government charges about a 20% commission. But the problems go much deeper than that. Cubans that have access to hard currency live much better than the rest of the population. So you have a situation where a Cuban bartender working in a hotel that tourists visit and earning tips could end up earning more in just a day than a Cuban doctor does working for the state in an entire month. In 2013, the Cuban government said they would move to a single currency. But that hasn't happened yet, and no one will say why. But as Cuba and the US government move to normalize relations, the pace of economic activity is expected to pick up. Just one more reason for the Cuban government to try to create a more stable currency policy now.
So as you can see, in summary, what we went over today was that Cuba's dual currency system is a result of the recession the Cuban economy fell into after entering the special period. Having a dual currency system was put in place to help the economy grow, but instead its consequences have negatively impacted the people of Cuba. Companies are expected to maintain two books, one in convertible peso and one in the Cuban peso. And lastly, even though both the Cuban peso and the convertible Cuban peso hold their own issues, the Cuban people wish to be in a state with only the Cuban peso as a currency. Thank you.